Halloween fever has hit one-on-one. Coming up,
we dish out candy to the best of the NBA.
go trick-or-treating at the World Series.
And cover the tombstones with the NFL.
All those treats and more, and it all starts right now.
Welcome back to 101 Sports. I'm Stephen Normington. Wade Phillips went from coaching on the sidelines to sitting in the nosebleeds. Worse than going from president to janitor?
Or worse than getting an apple during trick-or-treating. I'm Preston Willett, and here are your starting five. The long-awaited ruling on the Ed O'Bannon case has finally come to the forefront as federal judge Claudia Wilkin has made college athletes certainly better off financially. In her decision, she ruled that not allowing payments for use of player names goes against the antitrust laws and that the NCAA cannot prohibit teams from giving student athletes cost of living stipends. Steve, how will this change the future of college athletics?
Well, first and foremost, immediately, athletes are now eligible to receive $5,000 if you're an FBS football player or Division I basketball player for use of likeness. But the real question, the floodgate open question is, what is the NCAA and what are the lawyers going to do about players asking for money for previous use of likeness? Now, players previously signed statements allowing the NCAA to use their likeness, but for people like Johnny Manziel, Ed O'Bannon, players who have really been exploited by the NCAA, they have legitimate claims.
And that's why I'm saying this is just the first step of many towards college athletes getting paid, because, I mean, Ed O'Bannon, the main guy in this case, is still not going to get paid from this case.
And he didn't get paid from it. That's absolutely nuts. One of the things that people don't realize, though, is the majority of athletic programs don't make money. 23 out of 238 public universities broke even or were able to cover their expenses.
Well,
16 of those had stipends,
Yeah,
meaning that no college programs are making money. So if you have to spend money for players' likeness, how are you going to represent the athletes'
I just think
needs?
this is going to be a big step for athletes because they can no longer be taken advantage of. And now, we can have that where they're going to have money when they get out. So maybe this even keeps players in school longer.
It's a good idea to give them the money when they get out.
Yeah.
Another scandal, University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, brace yourselves. The NCAA is most likely coming down hard after an independent investigator revealed that the athletics department knew about and encouraged fake paper classes that involved no attendance in order to allow athletes to raise their GPAs and to keep them eligible. How should the NCAA handle this situation, and what can UNC do, Preston, to prevent it from ever happening again?
Well, the penalty should be very similar to Penn State, if not more extreme.
Yeah.
I think they should be under probation, UNC, for their giving their students classes. I think the NCAA should be in charge of what classes those students take and the structure of those classes now, just because UNC's proven over the 18 years that they cannot do that.
Preston, we're 21 years old. This has been going on pretty much for the entirety of our lifetime with academic counselors, coaches, administrations, faculty.
It's
absolutely ridiculous.
Through these programs.
I mean, the fact that this goes on isn't really too surprising, but once you find out about it, you have to strike down. You have to strike down hard. I'm guaranteeing it's at least going to be a death penalty for 1 year for football and basketball or something close to it, because Roy Williams still during these investigations has pleaded his innocence, which really, can you really say that when you know your players are taking the same classes in African-American studies?
They got Rashad McCants,
Okay, Rashad McCants, is he off the hook now? Or does he still have a beef with him?
I don't think so. Because, he still took part in it. This Sunday, Lamar Houston tore his ACL celebrating a sack. This is not the first time an NFL player has been injured celebrating a touchdown or a big play. Before the season, the NFL banned dunking on the field goal post as a form of celebration. Steve, now, should teams keep players from celebrating, and should the NFL make any more regulations about celebrating?
I'm going to take as much as I love fun, and I don't want to be the fun police, I'm going to take out my baton and completely beat down celebrating right now.
All right.
Players have no reason to celebrate because there's a chance that they could get injured. It's like me leaving to go to school every day. It's not likely I'm going to get run over by a car, but it could happen. Players should try to prevent injuries from occurring any way possible because it's their livelihood.
And that's why I think NFL teams, they should break out some old school video,
like the dodgeball videotape,
and go over safe ways to celebrate with Roger Goodell narrating.
That would be absolutely perfect. But Stephen Tolek, Lamar Houston, they were Pro Bowl caliber players before this happened, and they're going to lose a lot of money simply because they were celebrating.
And it brings up the question: the NFL was so bang on getting rid of Terrell Owens and Chad Ochocinco celebrations, but those were safe. Those were fun.
And it was fun. More people were drawn to the game.
Maybe they should bring those back and get rid of the other ones.
Yeah. On Friday afternoon, Tampa Bay Rays manager Joe Maddon exercised his opt-out clause and left the team immediately. Most baseball experts and fans consider Maddon to be one of the best managers in the game. But how many wins do you think managers actually account for over a given season?
I think a lot. I think a lot more than any other sport because baseball lineup structure, the ability to make a good lineup, decide who's going to be hitting, what order they're going to hit, and who's going to be out on the mound pitching every inning. That takes a lot of effort, Steve.
I'll give you that. Baseball more so than any sports because it's 162 games. Depicting your lineup and picking the right lineup is extremely important. Looking at those advanced sabermetrics, speaking of Preston, last year, managers only accounted for 95% of them between 2 losses and 2 wins for every single given team.
Hey.
And speaking of last season, only 21 players and 7 pitchers accounted for more wins than all the managers in the history of professional baseball.
I like those statistics.
In the history.
Those statistics are fun, but take away the manager from a team, and what do you have? You have
a bunch
shambles.
of players that could do it.
Shambles.
They could do it themselves.
They couldn't do it themselves.
Yeah.
Oh, Steve,
if you have a mature veteran, throw out a lineup. I could throw
my
it.
gosh.
But more so than any other sport, like Eric Spoelstra, we could do that job. I could coach LeBron James to a championship.
I would like to say I could. In very sad news, 22-year-old St. Louis Cardinals outfielder Oscar Tavares died in a car crash on Sunday afternoon in the Dominican Republic. The Dominican Republic has the most car crash deaths per year, which brings up the question, what can teams do in order to make sure their players' safety is being watched even in the offseason? Steve?
What is this? George Orwell's 1984. You can't limit what players are doing in the offseason. They're people too. They have to go out and live their lives. I understand that you had a lot riding on this kid, but it's a freak accident, very similar to like what happened with Oklahoma State, that plane crash in 2001. It's just a shame, really. And if you could do more things to limit things like this happening, go ahead, try. But at the end of the day, people have to live their lives.
Accidents happen all the time, and they're brought to the forefront when it's a major story like this with a major young superstar and coming up in baseball. It's bringing up even more to the forefront. But again, you have to allow the baseball player to have a life outside of baseball, outside of his sport. I mean, in this case, he was just going back to his home country of the Dominican Republic. Nothing you can really do there.
And for the St. Louis Cardinals, you give up Alan Craig. This guy's your future in the outfield. It's going to be tough sledding from here. They're a great organization, though. Hopefully they'll be able to pull it off. Our condolences go out to the Tavares family. Coming up next, the NBA.
Not every child comes home with what they wanted after a night of trick-or-treating, but neither will every NBA team. I'm joined by NBA experts Stephen A. Harris and Chris Edwards to dish out some candy to the best teams from every NBA division. The more candy a team gets means the more sure they are that that team will win the division. Guys, let's start off with the Atlantic Division. Chris, give me your prediction. How much candy do they get?
I'm going to give them 10 pieces out of 10 because just of the division Toronto is in, Brooklyn is not going to do anything in this division. Neither will Philadelphia. There's still a development process. Toronto's bringing back their starting 5. Kyle Lowry's really coming up there. They added bench depth. I mean, this is pretty easy for me, 10 out of 10.
That's the important thing you said. Toronto's bringing their team back. Every other team's kind of bringing in new pieces. They're still in a rebuilding phase. Toronto brought back their main core of Lowry. They re-signed Patterson. They re-signed Vasquez. They still got Valenciunas, who's only getting better. They brought back their core that allowed that resurgence in
And
Toronto.
they have Lou Williams now, too.
Exactly.
Both got Toronto there. Moving on to the Central. Who do we have there, Stephen A.?
I'm going to say the Chicago Bulls. I know this clearly isn't the popular pick of what's going on over there. But I say Cleveland starts out slow. I'm not saying that they're not the best team and they're not the most talented team, but I think they start off slow, just like Miami did. Chicago got the number 1 seed both years that Derrick Rose was healthy.
Well, Chicago started off slow, too. I mean, you had to get the edge of the Cavs.
Hey, they brought their core back. Their Derrick Rose is coming back. They got better.
You have a whole new big 3 with LeBron coming back, and it's the LeBron factor. You saw what LeBron did when he went to Miami. They were already in the finals.
And they started off slow.
Yeah.
And they got it back by the end of the season.
Exactly.
I'm going to cut it off there. I'm just going to say Derrick Rose is coming back from injury, so what's to say they don't start off slow.
Exactly.
Moving on to the Southeast. Chris, who do we have?
I mean, this is really tough for me. I'm going to give the Heat 5 pieces of candy because I'm not that
Interesting.
confident because you lose LeBron James, and if you lose that much of production, you can't replace that, even with Luol Deng. With that being said, though, you have to give respect to Chris Bosh and a future Hall of Famer in Dwayne Wade. I'm really confident that it'll be competitive, but I really see this wide open.
If we're going to give respect, we need to give respect to the Whiz Kids. They're winning it 7 out of 10.
Bradley Beal's hurt.
7 out of 10?
He's going to come back. Paul Pierce is there. John Wall is an up-and-coming
but there's still
top
all
5
those
point
injuries,
guard in
though.
the league. Let's try. It's going to be the Wiz kids. Miami, not so much.
Yeah,
All right,
Charlotte
we got the
chance, though.
we got the Wizards, we got the Heat. Moving on to the Western Conference now in the Northwest. Stephen A., who do we have?
It's going to be OKC just because that division doesn't really have much else to
Even
offer.
with Kevin Durant?
Even with Kevin Durant hurt, it's not going to make that big of a difference. It's not going to be enough for teams like the Nuggets or the Jazz or anybody like that to make that big of a jump.
You brought up the Jazz.
I think Portland.
We're moving on over here.
Yeah,
Chris, give me one.
it's the same thing. I agree with Stephen A. I give him like APs out of 10 because it is OKC. They're going to start off slow, but they dealt with this before when Russell Westbrook was out. So OKC is it's their division to lose.
Portland's the only team that has a chance.
That's a tough.
to do it, and they're not going to.
You know, Russell Westbrook being out, Kevin Durant being out, not exactly the same. Moving on to the Pacific Division now. Chris, who do we have?
LA Clippers, this is an easy one. Again, it's their division to lose. They bring back their core. You have Chris Paul. You got Blake Griffin. Coach Doc, I mean, it's just an awesome coach. There's not really anyone in that division other than the Phoenix Suns.
I'm going to agree with the Clippers too, but I'm giving them the slightest chance. I'm giving the Clippers the slightest edge over Golden State.
Okay.
Just because Golden State got that new coach, but they're bringing back Blake Griffin. They finally got some front court depth. I'm going to give them the slightest edge, but I'm still going to go with the Clippers.
That two pieces of candy, it is for Golden State because that's like the other team that I had considered.
Well, new owner for the Clippers, Steve Ballmer, will go home with a lot of candy in his pocket then.
Oh, yeah.
Now the Southwest to close it all off. Do we have the defending champs?
It's got to be the defending champs just because they brought back 100% of their playoff minutes. When you bring back everybody that you played in the playoffs and get guys like Kyle Anderson, then you're not going anywhere in that division, no matter what anybody else does, especially when you still got Greg Popovich.
I agree with you. I think the Spurs will win this division, but it's going to be a lot harder than it has been in the past because the division got a whole lot tougher, especially with Dallas. They reloaded. They signed Chandler Parsons. They bring back William Feldman, and they get in Tyson Chandler.
I'm not worried about Raymond Felton doing anything in Dallas.
But Chandler Parsons,
Raymond Felton, really, all the teams in Dallas,
Trevor Ariza,
all the players in Dallas, you bring up
Howard.
Raymond Felton as a game changer.
You got to give respect to the other teams. This is a hard division.
They still got Tony Parker, Timmy D, and Greg. Raymond Felton, really?
Raymond Felton. Who knows?
But Raymond Felton.
But
it's Raymond Felton.
We don't. Maybe he's in shape now. Maybe he's not like 300 pounds. But unfortunately for Raymond Felton, we are all out of candy here. So you've got to move on to the next house. Coming up, though, Steve will be joined by our MLB Trick or Treat experts to cover the World Series. Stay tuned.
It's October, the season of playoff baseball on Halloween, and I'm here with our MLB experts Natalie Beach and Ben Greenberg to combine the best of both as we give out treats for great performances and tricks for lackluster performances. So let's start off with tricks for the World Series, the game that's going on right now. Who hasn't been good so far, Natalie?
I'm going with James Shields on the Kansas City Royals. They call him Big Game James, but he really just hasn't delivered that nickname. Game one, right away, gives up 3 runs in the first inning, gives up 2 more, only goes 3 complete innings. He was a little bit better in Game 5, but of course going against Madison Bumgarner, anyone would look bad. Right. But I still think his free agency is going to be questionable this year, just not delivering in the postseason.
Absolutely, and you're right. On offense, Mike Moustakas, by the way, has been a big-time trick for the Royals. This guy had 4 home runs in the postseason, and yet in the World Series he has 0 so far. I mean, I'm not saying the long ball is the most important thing because you need to manufacture runs too, but when you don't hit any home runs, it's very tough to win ball games.
Yeah, but it is only the World Series, and it's only been 5 games, so I feel like it's a little bit harder. Whereas James Shields is only given up 15 runs.
You have the tougher player to defend. Come on, Natalie's got the right answer. It's big game against James Shields. Let's just move on. Which player's been a treat so far?
Gotta be Madison Bumgarner. I mean, how can you argue with that for the Giants? He's just been absolutely incredible. Maybe it wasn't the biggest surprise ever because we know he's the king of the World Series, but he has MVP locked up.
Okay, sure, obviously, but that's a very easy pick, right? But when is Bumgarner not great in postseason games, especially the World Series? I like Omar Infante here. I think, first of all, he's a pretty average second baseman. He ranked 17th defensively this year in the regular season, and he's been perfect in the World Series defensively.
But he's not a god like Bumgarner.
Right, but he does have his 4 RBIs so far.
Game 5. I mean, he has 2 shutouts this month in the postseason.
But that's no surprise.
No one is more of a treat to watch than Madison Bumgarner.
Okay.
That .25 ERA, everyone throws that out there, the best in 25 innings pitched in World Series history. But Omar Infante, Natalie, no one expected that. I'm going to go with Ben on this one. Let's move on. What was the biggest treat from this regular season?
All right, well, this treat is very easy for me. It's Derek Jeter.
How?
Okay.
2014 was a farewell tour.
Hold on. Exactly.
He didn't actually play any good baseball.
Okay, listen up for a second. This is bigger than baseball. This is bigger than on the field. If there's one guy who has stood above the era of lying and steroids and off the field issues, resulting in suspensions. It's Derek Jeter.
He was the bottom 5 in every meaningful statistic
It was
this
a
year.
treat
He was not
to
a
watch
treat
Derek
to watch
Jeter
this
year.
Maybe if you were the Yankees, you got a lot of treats from the other teams, but he did not actually play any quality baseball. My pick for treat is Buck Showalter from the Orioles, manager of the year. He won it in '94. He won it in 2004. Do you know what year it is? 2014. It's about time.
No,
but besides that, he has shown off incredible managerial skills. The Orioles easily won the AL East without Machado, Davis, Wieters. Ryan Flaherty had a great year.
If anything, the Orioles underachieved this year. They're not a surprise anymore.
But I just think Buck Showalter really is the treat of the year.
Okay.
I mean, you saw his incredible managerial performance in the ALDS. I mean, getting the Tigers to hit into a double play.
Natalie.
I could talk about this for days.
You're right. I'll give you that. You're right. Jeter's ending was fitting for the gods.
Right.
However, it wasn't that great during the entire season. What is the trick? Speaking of tricks, I think Jeter's a little bit of a trick. What is the trick of the entire season?
I'm going to go with the Tampa Bay Rays here. A lot of people had them on their postseason possibility list, and they just tanked. They ended with a 77 and 85 record. They had 1 month with a winning record in July. They were 17-6. They traded Price, who was their only All-Star. And I mean, now Joe Madden has opted out of his contract, and their owner is talking about moving into Montreal. They lost.
Let me stay in the AL East here, and ironically, it was the Yankees who were the trick.
Yeah, because Jeter wasn't playing
Jeter
well.
was the treat, but the Yankees were the trick. Major League Baseball basically said to the Yankees, "We want you to be good this year." They write off A-Rod's contract. And they say, listen, Yankees, spend all the money you have, be good, please. And they couldn't deliver.
Spend too much money, and
Absolutely.
that doesn't actually win baseball games.
I totally agree.
Anytime you put on
Totally
pinstripes,
agree.
you have unprecedented expectations. I'm going to go with Ben on this one. So even, guys, settle the score.
Okay.
That's all the candy we have to dole out. Trick or treat. Coming up next, let's settle tombstones and write them for the NFL.
You didn't give up on sex. Don't give up on birth control either. There are more methods than you think. Find yours at bedsider.org.
We're well into the NFL season now, and fans can start to see how the season's going to go for their team. Some of those players, coaches, and teams are well into the process of digging their own graves. To help them dig, I'm joined by NFL experts John Roddy and Ryan Meisinger. Guys, let's get into it. You got your tombstones ready. Who is the player that is digging their grave first? John, we'll start with you.
Ryan, I apologize in advance, but you'll probably have to agree with me. It is Jets quarterback Geno Smith.
I couldn't
Now,
agree more.
why would one ask, is it Geno Smith?
Why? Let me ask you.
31 interceptions, 19 touchdowns. And that sums up the career of Geno Smith. 3 first-quarter interceptions
with Geno, there's not much
week.
to talk about because we all know that Geno's a terrible
Yeah.
quarterback, and Mike Vick really isn't going to solve it. You could argue that he deserves tombstone as well.
Of course.
I am going to go with a rest in peace to beast mode, Mr. Skittles, Marshawn Lynch. I think there are too many things going on in Seattle right now. He hasn't had a productive game in a couple weeks.
Yep.
Trade rumors all the way up in the Northwest about him going places at the end of the season, him maybe going somewhere. Well, the trade deadline's passed now, but I think his days in Seattle are numbered.
All right, guys, let's move on to the coach that you think's done for the season. We'll start with you. You're going a little close to home here.
Yeah, I'm going to stick with the Geno and Michael Vick, and I am going to say rest in peace to Rexiford Ryan. Rex Ryan his days with the Jets are numbered. And I think there's more on the surface than people think. I think there's a big scheme going on behind the scenes with John Idzik and Woody Johnson. I think Woody wants John Idzik, but doesn't want Rex there. So that's why John Idzik didn't spend that $22 million.
The most dysfunctional organization in the NFL. We can both agree.
For sure.
My pick, Falcons coach, Mike Smith. Sorry, Preston.
There it is.
No. Don't apologize.
Mike Smith for me. I'm going out on a limb here. Worst coach in the NFL.
Going on a limb?
Okay.
Yeah.
2012.
You're completely fine
2012, 13-3 record. I thought, wow, the Falcons are finally good. Matt Ryan coming into zone. I never believed in him. Next season, 4-12. This season,
fired last year.
This season, one of the worst divisions in football, and they are in third place. And we all saw the Detroit game last week. Oh my goodness gracious, Mike Smith, are you kidding me?
Do you know where Mike Smith's downfall started? It was last year, and it was against my man, Rex Ryan and the New York Jets. That's where Mike Smith's downfall started.
I mean, I couldn't agree with you anymore. Thank you for bringing Mike Smith to the attention of the nation because I'm ready for him to be gone. We'll move on to the team that is RIP, done for the season. John, we'll start with you.
Well, I mean, it's even surprised me when I was doing my research, and I really chose this team, the Chicago Bears, my RIP team. I'll tell you why. The Bears, they looked very good at the beginning of the season, but some of their losses, they look so two-faced to me. They lost the Dolphins, but they beat the Bills in overtime.
Two-faced is no better way to describe Jay Cutler, too.
Oh my, don't even get me started on Jay Cutler.
Harvey two-faced man in the NFL.
The most indifferent man to the sport I've ever seen. Jay Cutler's face on the sidelines during a win. Jay Cutler's face during a loss.
He is the epitome.
There's no difference.
The opposite. You have Vince Carter in the NBA, half man, half amazing. He is half man, half terrible in the NFL. Jay Cutler.
There you go.
So I am going to go with rest in peace to the Carolina Panthers.
Ooh.
You have Cam Newton, you have Kelvin Benjamin, you have Luke Kuechly, who's an absolute monster at the defense. That being said, I think the New Orleans Saints are hitting their stride, and I think it's too much for the Carolina Panthers and Cam Newton to really stay on track. There's no running game there. You have injuries. Not looking good.
I'm going to say I don't think anyone in that division is hitting their stride. The NFC South actually looks terrible this year. But maybe one of these, some of these graves will be saved by the bell. But for now, we're moving on. And coming up next, Steve is joined by our NHL expert to see some of the scares on the ice.
Hockey, Halloween, Camp Sosowski, the Broad Street Bullies. What more could the people possibly want? As we discussed the scariest challenges facing teams from in each division. So let's start off with the East. Who should be most scared in the Eastern Conference right now?
So in the East, you're looking at the Carolina Hurricanes, and they should be terrified with how this year has started. They have 2 points in 7 games. They haven't won a game in regulation yet. Just terrible, absolutely awful. They had injuries to Jordan Stahl, Eric Stahl, Nathan Gerbe. But at this point, Carolina fans should be very afraid with how the season is going to go. On the other side of it, you look, they're in contention for the Connor McDavid sweepstakes at this point.
And speaking of which, there's a website with reverse playoff standings to tank to get McDavid. So that's very interesting. Why is he such a great transcendent player?
He's the player, a once-in-a-generation kind of player. He's a Sidney Crosby kind of player. At least that's what the scouts are saying. And you look at this draft class as well. He is far and above beyond everybody else in this class.
So a 5-tool lefty center. He's the type of guy that everyone wants. So I suggest leaving Eric Stahl out as long as you possibly can if you're Carolina.
And then you build a franchise around a Connor McDavid.
Right. Let's move to the Western Conference.
So in the West, we're talking about the Dallas Stars. And we're talking about them not living up to expectations this year. After this huge offseason they had, landing Jason Spezza and putting in a lot of other pieces in place, they need to live up to these expectations, which are, going to the playoffs and making a deep run.
Well, you say playoffs. They're in probably, debatably, the toughest division in hockey.
Well,
you have
that's
St.
the other
Louis,
thing.
Chicago. What do they do? Can they make any headway here?
Well, right now they're in the middle of the pack. A lot of that could be chemistry with new pieces coming into the team. But if Spezza and Sagan and Jamie Benn can all hit their stride and they get good goaltending from Kari Lehtinen, they can definitely compete.
The good news is they have 10 points right now, which isn't bad, but they're 28th in goals against. You never want to see that. No. But coming up after the break, Preston is joined by our fantasy football expert.
One-on-one is back, and I'm joined by our fantasy football guru, Jared Kimball, to go over his fantasy football picks for this Halloween weekend. A little Halloween themed here. We're going with your black cat pick, the guy that you need to stay away from.
I think it's going to be Phillip Rivers, quarterback for the San Diego Chargers. After the last couple of weeks, I don't want to face the Miami Dolphins at all. They're 4th in pass defense this year. They haven't given up the most they've given up this year in pass yards is 264. So I wouldn't touch Phillip Rivers this weekend. Plus, he is averaging 22 points a game, which is really, really good. But his 5 best games have been against defenses that rank bottom 10 in the league in pass defense. So I'd stay totally away from Mr. Floaters, as I like to call him.
But you do want to start the Dolphins defense this week.
Yeah.
Next pick, return of the dead pick, someone who has done bad but is going to do well now.
I'm going to pick Julian Edelman, wide receiver for the New England Patriots. He's faced 2 putrid defenses against the past 2 weeks against the New York Jets and the Chicago Bears. And he only had a combined 5 receptions for 58 yards. And now he's facing the Denver Broncos, who he loves to play. They're 13th, so they're mid-range against the pass. But he just loves playing them so much. In 2 games last year, he had a combined 19 receptions, 199 yards, and 3 touchdowns. And at 4,100, his price on DraftKings, who would not love that value?
Yeah, a cheap pickup right there. Paranormal activity pick here. Someone's projected to do bad that will do well now.
Jamal Charles, he's been fantastic this year, but a lot of people are predicting him to have a bad game. The Jets are his matchup. They were number 1 in rush defense last year. They're 8th this year. So they've been absolutely fantastic against the run. But people really forget about Jamal Charles in the receiving game. We saw it last year against Oakland. He had 3 receiving touchdowns, and I think he can do that again. We saw against the Jets, Brandon Oliver had a receiving touchdown and great receiving totals. And then just a couple weeks ago, Shane Vereen did the same thing. He got on the board with a receiving touchdown. I think Jamal Charles can do that as well.
That would help out my fantasy team greatly. Now we're going to go to the last one, the monster pick. Who will score the most points this week in fantasy football?
I think it's going to be my boy Dez Bryant, wide receiver for the Dallas Cowboys. My nickname for him is his Dezness because he's so great. But if you have a couple of value guys in your lineup, you definitely want to get him in because I think he's going to have a huge game. Everybody expected it Monday night against the Redskins, but it just didn't come. He did have a good game. He put up a touchdown, but it was a disappointment because he didn't reach the value of his price. And I think he can double his value at only $8,000. And I think he's going to be low owned because people were so disappointed with how he did. And they're facing the worst pass defense in the league against the Cardinals, who might not have Patrick Peterson as well.
There you go. Looks like a favorable matchup for Dez Bryant. If I were you, I would listen to those picks, or you could end up with a couple of milk duds this week. That's enough puns for now, though. Coming up next, Steve and I are back at the desk to talk about the curses that have haunted teams the most over the years.
Jinxes, curses, and hexes. No, we aren't witches eager to cast them out. We are here at One-on-One Sports eager to discuss them. So, Preston, what is the best or worst hex, jinx, what have you? What's worse?
Well, the all-time curse for who is the most desperate team in all of professional sports? The Chicago Cubs. The Chicago Cubs. And it all dates back to the curse of the Billy Goat. A 1945 World Series game, Billy Cianis, owner of the Billy Goat Bar in Chicago, brought his goat to the game. Fans by the 7th inning had complained so much about the odor of the goat that Cubs officials had to kick him out of the stadium. And this is what he said: "Them Cubs, they ain't gonna win no more." Guess what? Lost the next 2 games of that World Series, lost the World Series, and they have not won an NL pennant or a World Series since then. And they are the most desperate team in all sports, without a doubt.
Let's talk about a sport that people care about and watch these days. Professional football.
That's harsh. That's harsh.
No. It's just. The Madden football curse, ever since players have been able to be on the cover in 1999, I'm going to have to look down to rattle off all the injuries. Marshall Faulk, 2003, injured, never the same player. Michael Vick, a leg injury that hurt for you.
It hurts a lot.
Donovan McNabb, a sports hernia injury for me. My Eagles were never the same. Sean Alexander, 2007, he's out of the league by the end of 2008. Absolutely nuts. Vince Young, 2008, his rookie year, he's on the cover. You all know where he is now. Peyton Hillis, he's just downright despicable. Not some good stuff with that Madden curse.
He's gotten hurt, It's a combination of things. Well, that's all the time we have for today, but if you've missed anything or want to watch it again, check us out on youtube.com/101sports.
Also, be sure to like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter at 101 Sports.
As always, thanks for watching, and until next time,
whose side are you on?
Happy Halloween.
Happy Halloween.